Yeah, I liked your initial email to me when I invited you onto the podcast. You said, some of the things that I have to say are perceived as controversial. Are you sure you want to get yourself involved? And I thought, well, that sounds like an interesting place to kickstart the conversation. Maybe you could tell me what's so controversial, because from my perspective, nothing seems overly controversial, but I know that running's a highly opinionated sport.
Yes, it's a highly opinionated sport, and I think people, it's an area where we tend to have techniques, um, and then we tend to attach value or earn money from a technique or a procedure, and so if someone bypasses what you think is really important or doesn't place emphasis on it or whatever, that's when people get into trouble. I loved Ido Portal did a podcast, and I mean he's an extraordinary movement guru, and he said something that really stuck with me: is humans should be humans first, and just grateful that you are a human, and our humanity is really important. And then secondly, you're a human blessed enough to move, because some humans aren't blessed enough to move. Some humans don't have four limbs. So respecting and being grateful for the amount that you can move, your ability to move, even if it's hampered, it's extraordinarily more than some people. And then lastly, we tend to be what we attach to ourselves. So like, you're the relaxed runner, I'm the inner runner, um, but when you're he calls it a dogma, and a dogma is a good name if you Google the definition of dogma. So I think it's really important that we unfortunately get ourselves attached to the third part of all of this. Like I'm the 4-foot ultra runner, and maybe it serves you better to run on with your whole foot, not just your forefoot. But if you're teaching that as a you teach that's your message, you lose the ability to think clearly. And I think we should all hold knowledge lightly in our hands, because facts do change and perceptions change, and how we see the world and running changes, and it changes often quickly and a lot. Okay, so something you can be very, very sure about in 5 years' time is not even relevant anymore, or has been proven to be sort of less than value, right? So I think along those lines, that's where the controversy comes in. And we have hashtags and Instagram and influencers and and various sayings that on the surface are true but don't hold value later on. So I do, in American running, the controversial bit would probably be there's a lot of emphasis on high cadence and turnover, and I don't ever work directly on cadence or turnover. I watch it, and we like to see it become healthy and appropriate, but I don't tell people your cadence should be this. Let's say, and then there's people that are desperately working in their cadence, so that would be controversial, I would imagine. And then also where we get into trouble is I'm starting to I think people think of running the way I work, which will be controversial to some, is especially if your livelihood's caught up into it, or you're deeply invested in a process. Is I think that we intrinsically know how to run, and our job is to reveal it and express it, and then we can protect it or enhance it. And by doing that, we could add drill, we could add strength training to it, we can polish it up, right? Whereas I think there's a big narrative that if you do a lot of strength training and, let's say, drills, that will teach you how to run, and then you can become a runner. And it certainly has happened, and it does happen. It just doesn't happen with any sense of reliability. you know, so I typically, often when I work with people, I'll say, we need to ease off on strength training and drills, and which I think people find very, very controversial, in order to find your proper running patterns. And once we have those, we can add back on. But a lot of what we do, I mean, in running or thinking clearly, or in problem solving, is reducing things down, trying to work upstream. And then once you can fix things upstream, a lot of things fall into place below. But I feel like a lot of people end up in sort of downstream reacting all the time. And it's like a lot of drills aren't enough to teach you how to run, aren't enough to teach you foundational movements. And, I just don't get in the world. I try not to get involved with reacting. I like to be proactive. So that, if your livelihood is strength and someone says we need to back off on strength, or you're not really going to find how to run through strength training, that can be a lot for some people. Or so probably it's along those lines, But there are many ways to. I hate saying that because I love cats, but there's many ways to skin the cat. So you do you.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, for sure. It's an interesting place to kickstart because that's been one of the standout features that I've noticed in nearly everything that you've had to say, whether it's a video that I'm watching or something that I'm reading. It seems that the running technique is an offshoot of something which is so much deeper than we often like to make it. I mean, we can get into this later as well, but for the few people in the sport of distance running who are aware of the fact of the benefits of, learning to run more efficiently with the way that they move, I think one of the go-tos is, okay, tell me what to do with my hands, tell me what to do with my shoulders, tell me how to hold
yeah,
my head. Do I run tall? Do I lean forward? And it is very much a prescription as to, okay, what do the best runners do? Does that mean I should do it?
yeah,
Whereas the angle that you come at it from is one which almost seems to have a spiritual component to it. It's like an expression of sort of like what you just touched on before. Like a lot of us know how to run. We've just got to refine some of the things as we go along. Like, sure, we can make little adaptations and things, but I'd never heard a technique coach take that approach to technique. Like I thought maybe you could talk to that for a little bit because it seems that something far deeper than just how you look when you run and the efficiency of how you move when you run is sort of driving the message that you share to athletes.
yeah. Well, let's explain this. So what I do think are hallmarks of healthy movement is our hips should extend first. And then that would imply when you're running that your knee goes behind your hip and then you straighten your leg. You sort of along those lines. It doesn't have to be perfect. Whereas I know it sounds weird, but there's, you can hit the ground going backwards, shortening your hamstring, or you can pull the ground backwards, or you can. There's many ways, but basically, hip extension base would mean the primary drive of your running comes from straightening your leg. Okay. If you get that right, it's remarkable how many things will fall into place. So that might help people immediately say, oh, okay, this is what we're talking about when you're running, if you had to sort of define it. But I think for most people, we lose how to run. We forget how to run. I think nature and nurture and whatever, children often run with great mechanics. Fundamentally and overall, they might be a bit wonky, they might be a bit wobbly, but generally speaking, like if we look at things that I think are important in running, like do your shins, your lower leg angle, is that pointing backwards and driving the earth backwards? And the answer is yes. And are they stacked? Yes. And then there's a whole lot of sort of features that children have. And I know someone thought that, well, that's very romantic. That's like saying a 2-year-old can squat better than an adult, but he's got different limb proportions. I mean, I'm talking about 10 or 12-year-olds, right? Generally speaking, there's a lot that they do right that is very difficult to actually, or can be very difficult to get into back into adult running. So I think a lot of it is remembering or falling back to base neural patterns. I know it sounds crazy, but when the way I work is with annual. So one is I'll treat people manually with my hands. And I just sort of work around with fascia and nerves. But generally speaking, as you clear dysfunction out of a human being, the motor patterns change and the timing and the movement patterns change. And in someone that has very little held tension in their body, very few compensations, very few compensations, they tend to run way more healthier. So without ever cueing someone how to run, you can get them to run better and better and better by helping them overcome dysfunctional patterns in their body. And that's kind of
Mm.
how I work. And literally, I know it sounds crazy, but at the moment, I don't cue people how to run. Like very, very, very few cues. I'll tell them posture, like basically you want head on top of shoulders, shoulders on top of hips. We want to not lean forward. We probably want to shift forward because I think you should definitely be able to wiggle your toes when you're running. And in my mind, in America, like everyone's got opinions, right? But there's a guy who's really respected, wrote a book and says there's no difference between sprint biomechanics and running biomechanics. And like, I can't see that those are the same things. So generally speaking, we want to be able to wiggle our toes when we run because we need forefoot to rear foot mobility. And other than that, I don't cue running, really. I don't tell people what to do with the arms much more than that. I don't tell this angle, release this, do this, and I don't specifically give drills either. And it's a remarkable the improvement and the change and the confidence that athletes can have in their running. And the end game of this is not my opinion or my agenda. The end game of this is to get an athlete to a space where they deeply and intrinsically trust their running. That's the agenda. That's the goal. And kind of I see what I do is we have a sort of a bit of a protocol that we go through. It doesn't have to be that way. You can teach people to run many different ways. And my job is to help them solve movement problems that are preventing them from expressing themselves when they run. So it's a very much a different way around from, you can look at a runner and say, well, this angle's wrong, or if your elbow's up, drop your elbow, or I don't know, you make some judgments about their running, and then you tell people, okay, you need to do this and this and the following. Like I try not to be reactionary at all. We're trying to. So a lot of the times, like, it actually drives some athlete. Well, now that I've got really good at this, it's and my reputation's much bigger. It's easier. But it used to drive some athletes pretty crazy because they're like, you don't tell me enough. And I said, that looks amazing. Keep on keeping on. And they're like, no, that's not helping. What must I think about when I run? Okay. We've got better at giving them tools and resources that they can think of. But often what we do notice is I'll acknowledge when something shifts and looks like they've held on. So like, let's say I'll say, your breathing really looks so much better. The quality, the tone of the breathing looks better. Your neck looks relaxed. You're not using your accessory breathing muscles. What do you feel when you run? Did it feel better? What does it mean to you? Okay, yes. And how does it make you feel? Do you feel confident? Do you like this? Is this something? And then if we all agree that this is something that's really positive and beneficial, then we welcome it in as a guest and we make it feel welcome and we acknowledge that we've done good. This is a sensation. Motion and emotion is the same thing. You can't separate emotion and motion. You can't separate how you feel from how you run. And a lot of the time, the better you run, the more simple running gets. It becomes less parts, less things to think about. You feel way more connected. And where this almost spiritual nature comes in is once you start running properly, is you start to realize, oh, hang on, there's a whole nother world. And you start to reframe how you see the world and often how the world sees you. So that's like maybe a summary. I
Yeah,
hope.
man, it's such an interesting, inspiring perspective. I think to narrow the conversation down to just technique is such an injustice to what it is that you actually speak about, especially in regards to what you were saying about the natural movement of so many kids. Like, I haven't paid as much attention as what you have to the movement of kids when they run, but what I've noticed is my 3-year-old boy Charlie moves incredibly well. Like, it's
Yeah.
mind blowing. So many people watch him run down at the park, and I'm not kidding. I reckon 5 or 6 different people who know my role as a running coach have said to me, "Oh, you've started him early, huh?" Like,
Yeah.
and the truth is, I've done less work with him than any of the other
Yeah.
athletes that I work with as a whole. There's certainly, a lack of. There's very little tension. There's very little stress in his life, and any stress that does exist in his life, it seems to be resolved fairly quickly with like a really honest
Yeah.
scream or a punch or
Yeah.
a pushing his brother over or something. He doesn't
Yeah.
seem to carry on to tension like so many of us do. So I was just interested to use that for the next question to ask. So you mentioned the natural movement of kids, and you mentioned that as we get older, so much of that natural movement is lost or forgotten or not practiced. There's, in my mind, a few things come to mind. Firstly, like ability to resolve stress or the honesty to resolve stress as a kid seems far more effective because we can actually be honest about the fact that we're furious and not just store it up.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the other thing is, my boy is so active. There's very few moments in the day where he's
Yeah.
actually sitting down for any extended time. There's a lot of natural movement, which would do Ido Portal would be incredibly impressed with the
Yeah.
range of motion that he has.
Yeah.
And as you get older, we start to sit down more. We're not as playful. A lot of us don't handle stress as effectively
Yeah.
as what we may be able to do. And as you said, like emotion and motion are very hard to separate, and that stands out to me. And so, flexibility, stress management. What else is going on in an adult's life that's impacting their ability to move as freely as what a child might?
Um, Well, the controversial part would be, you can be over cued, or you can be barking up the wrong tree, or you can be, you're moving in a certain way for a reason. You make a false assumption, you try and correct the reason, and just suddenly you're going, okay, hang on a minute, like this can amplify and not reduce. And so that's why you got to be so careful. But, the sort of the general answer is basically a huge part of his environment. Okay. So, I tell some athletes, like, we're like pot plants, right? I can have a patients, because I don't know, they give me plants sometimes, right? Clients, and I don't have green thumbs, I have human thumbs, and I'm like, oh God, please don't die. You know what I mean? But you can put a pot plant in one corner of the room and it dies, and you can put it in another corner of the room and it makes it, or it might not like this room, but I move it to the sunnier side of the house and it thrives. And I think environment is massive for humans, and in creating the right environment, which is 3 podcasts on its own, is important. I think sitting and flexion play a massive role in terms of cycling and in terms of running. And I work a lot with triathletes, and 100% the bike massively influences how you run. And to sort of almost like not only negate the bad that can come from cycling, but if you can try with a triathlete, link the 3 sports across. So, as you can find the common movement patterns between the 3 sports, that they start to complement and enhance each other. That's really, where the money is. But generally speaking, cycling can really, really wreck your running. For people that don't know how to run and can't intrinsically run very well, a lot of them cross train on the bike, or you get injured, you cross train on the bicycle. And I'm like, yeah, you might not want to do that unless you know how to antidote that. And then trauma and emotional trauma, pain, all held in sort of flexion. There's a book called The Body Keeps the Score, which I haven't read, and I don't know why, but I've seen some not great reviews about it by experts in pain, and so I'm a bit up in the air of that. But we do hold past traumas in our body, and it does affect us, and it can hold us. I mean, like, you can have the wind crushed out of your cells as a teenager and then go through life with that trauma in you. That would be an emotional trauma. You're like, my mom died when I was 11, and there's zero doubt in my mind that affected massively how I developed as a teenager, and how I moved, and basically I obsessed with running because I couldn't run. Okay, clearly. So, and then just the mechanical trauma, like someone can, like, one of the big ones is like, because we sit so much, you can fall on your tailbone and have a coccyx injury and have, like, basically pelvic floor spasm and high hip stabilizer or high hip rotator spasm. And your talent can just flood out of your body. And then that's that. Your movement patterns are affected for the rest of your life. Your autonomic nervous system is affected for the rest of your life. And it's just almost too frightening to think that one amazing weekend snowboarding, which ended up going bad, can affect the talent for the rest of your life, but it happens.
Yeah. I used to run with a guy who was an incredible junior talent. Like, I think he ran about 4 minutes at age 17, possibly faster, over 1,500 meters. He moved, actually, I think he might have been 16, which here in Australia at the time was a pretty impressive time.
Yeah.
I think any 16-year-old, I think I was 19 when I ran under 4 minutes for the first time. But he got a stress fracture. And I remember before the stress fracture, he was one of the smoothest movers you could just look at. And you know how you can recognize efficiency? Like, you don't need to be necessarily trained to see Eliud Kipchoge or Hisham Al Garouj move and say, oh, something looks right about what it is that they're doing. But this guy was the same. You'd watch him and you're like, oh, I know he's doing that right. And I remember it must have been maybe, I can't quite remember, say 6 weeks to 3 months was the break. And I don't know what changed specifically, but he came back, and in his initial races, I was like, oh, he doesn't look right. He doesn't look like he used to. He looks jolty and he looks awkward. And it was, my old coach, Joe Carmody, was very, very focused on technique. It was sort of my introduction to the importance of efficient movement. Before that, the age of 15, I'd never really heard it. It was all about training and diet and recovery, but nothing about technique. So I was very in tune, or at least interested, with the way people moved. And from that day forward, he never really moved the same. I think he ran maybe 3:45 or so in the end, but he never became the athlete that I think so many athletes or so many people around him knew that he could be. So it's interesting to hear you say an injury that throws you off like that can just drain talent from the body, but also seem to, it was like he'd forgotten, as you say, forgotten how to move.
Yeah. And so we've, this interesting thought is which this will segue into another sort of section is if you're very talented, and if you have a gift and your gift happens to be running, because for a lot of people it's not, I don't think it was my gift. My gift might be helping people to run, but not actually running itself, right? But if you have a gift or a talent and a purpose, and I think people should live a life of purpose and should express their gifts, because it makes it able to. A healthy way to sustain high performance is to start reframing how what this all looks like, because that's how we hold on to this. Like, it's one thing to get an athlete to world-class level, it's another thing to keep that sustainable. And once you start trying to get that sustainable, you start to realize, like, I need to look at the world a little different. So that's a whole conversation in itself. But one of the things along that line is, if you have a gift, like Prefontaine's quote is something like, to give anything less than your best is to sacrifice the gift. For me, the gift is not yours. You're a caretaker of the gift, and it's bestowed upon you, and your job is to express it, but it's not your gift. And if you can separate yourself from your gift, which is kind of like, Ido Portal's, you're human, you move, this at the end is not you, you know what I mean? Then I think you get to hold on and keep and nurture the gift longer. Or I think it's easy to fall back to that gift. But, there's so many people trying so hard and so desperate and adding, and it's difficult. And I've got permission to talk about this, but there's a runner here in the US, Drew Hunter, who's kind of gone through the same thing. He was a phenom at 18 years and signed a pro contract at 18 years, and he's been languishing for 4, really, really battling. And it's amazing. He sort of turned that around and starting to basically, like he says, the amazing thing is that I know. I was starting to doubt my talent. Was this real? Was I really that good? Could I be that good? Like he just couldn't express this talent that he had inside him, and it was just getting worse and worse and worse. It wasn't even trending in the right direction. And then to sort of be able to turn that around and start expressing that gift, and to start realizing how special it is. And hopefully, I mean, it's still very, very early days, but hopefully from having it, losing it, the second time around, you have hopefully a much healthier relationship to that gift, and then you're able to express it fully. But yeah, unfortunately, and like, I work with Taylor Nibb, and she's had so many injuries that have radically affected what she couldn't do so many times. Like she's so appreciative of being healthy and starting to trust her body, and she'll never ever squander that gift, because it was there, but it was taken. It was there, but it was taken. So to start having that sense of appreciation, and then also that it can be taken away from you in a moment. And then you realize, like, there's a lot of serendipitous, there's a lot of luck. And then I think once you start realizing it's not just talent and hard work and skilled coaching, there's a massive component of luck, because in a heartbeat, it can be taken away from you for many, many reasons. That's when I think you dissolve your ego, and then you really starting to have like a more sustainable relationship with your work, and you realize it is a gift, and it's a privilege to be able to express it, and it can always be removed at any second. Whereas this dangerous sort of narrative of, I'm going to push through it, I'm going to work hard, it takes this, that, the next thing, you must do it my way. Your Instagram handle is, I know mine's in a runner, but you know what I mean? Like, your whole identity is wrapped up in a runner. The universe, I love to take that away from you and see, well, how do you feel now that you don't have your whole identity?
Yeah,
Who are
that's
you? That happens extraordinarily often. And you're basically begging the universe to take your identity away from you. You kind of challenging. I know it's a bit spiritual for some people, but like,
no, for
you
sure.
go and wrap your identity into something, the universe is going to delight in taking it all away from you, just so you can see, what are you now and what have you got?
Yeah,
If you
man.
behave well, it'll be returned.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot about the hero's journey in recent years, and what you're describing there sounds like the
Yeah.
painful process that is known as that hero's journey, going into
Yeah.
the darkness and coming
Yeah.
back with some tools that you were never going to be equipped with if you hadn't
Yeah.
made that voyage. But man, to touch on Drew Hunter, I followed the US trials and was pumped, and it was a combination of like such excitement for him and such disappointment that he wasn't half a step forward. But in terms of the progress that guy's made in recent years, is I mean, he was stealing all the attention from all the message boards. Something's gone right. So what, you've been working with him for a while?
Yeah, just 3 months or so. Very
Awesome.
short. His rate of improvement is so phenomenal that it's so week on week, and so like we don't actually know. He doesn't even know what to expect when he races because he's just been progressing so fast. But and here's another point that's really relevant. I feel is like, so I've been down to watch his group, the Tin Man, train 3 times, and
Yeah.
some of them are sort of doing like getting on the Lawrence program, right, and doing some of the things, but not as much as you might think, right? But the squad's running has totally transformed, and the transformation of their running happened in 2 weeks, and it's because one is, I mean, he's obviously a pivotal part of the squad. His running has changed so much and for the better. And humans, we ape, we copy our environment. So that whole environment shifted. The way he's running shifted. His emotion, his trust, his confidence, his mom, the coach, everyone. And so suddenly there's this polarizing thing, and you just seeing like the
Yeah.
whole group's running is improved. I mean, I went down there a week ago and I was like, this is literally miraculous. I got goosebumps just watching them run because it was phenomenal. And that was a 2 week change. And I'm not directly working with let's say Joey came seventh in the steeplechase. I mean, the dude's not running like he was a month ago. I can tell you that much. And so there is this group synergy in learning, and then again, if you create the right environment and you have the right role models, and then we often see that there's sort of the group dynamic. If you've ever done workshops, there's a group synergy that starts to happen where this collective consciousness sort of snaps in, and you'll find often someone at the back of the room figures it out, and it almost goes through the room like a domino, but it's from behind. Like, how does
Yeah.
someone that figures out a movement pattern behind you affect you on this side? But generally speaking, once one person gets it in the room, everyone gets it, even if their eye closed, lying on the mat. So there's a cool bit of magic happening there at the moment. Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, you made me think. I often try and decipher. I'm a stand-up comedian, and I often try and figure out exactly what's going on in a room when you're killing,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
take one set to one night and
Mhm.
bring the house down. It's
Yeah.
electric. You can take that same set to another room, and the environment's completely different. Like, you're doing the same stuff, and it's just
Yeah.
not hitting.
No, it
And
lands totally different, right? Yeah.
yeah. And it's like, in terms of environment, like I can't stop thinking about what you've said there. You've moved the pot plant from one corner, whether it's Drew Hunter or me at a stand-up night or whatever athlete you want to refer
Yeah.
to, and moved it to another corner, and something started to thrive. But I find that whole conversation around the particular energy shift in a room or in a group
Yeah.
so fascinating, because it's palpable, like especially in
Yeah.
a
Yeah. Yeah.
stand-up sense. But for you to go back down to Tin Man and notice that even the athletes and families surrounding those that you're working with is different. I mean, I know for a fact that if my wife has confidence or loves what it is that I'm doing, it's almost as though I lean into that and get
Yeah.
excited by it myself, and I can
Yeah.
see that flourish a little more. Whereas
Yeah.
if she's frowning at me and looking down and not happy, I go, okay, I'll scrap it, ignore it, pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So I can kind of
Moving
see
on.
how people feed off that energy. Yeah, that's fascinating. So what was I mean, you don't have to share too much or nothing if you don't want to, but what was the conversation with Drew? Because I know I remember him as like a 17, 18-year-old kid flying. And then, I mean, no offense, just because there's been so many athletes coming through, I'd kind of forgotten about him until a week and a half ago.
So I don't want to tell his story too much, but when he came to me, he was basically having massive right side tension, pain when he was running, discomfort associated with breathing, tightening up. You know, he was really languishing last year. I mean, he just couldn't run. He kind of turned some kind of corner. He was getting a little bit better, but he wanted basically just pain and discomfort out of his body was his primary goal. And he says that no one can help me. I've seen everyone. Like, I've been to everyone. And everyone's got an idea and a theory, but I just got to tell you, I'm kind of jaded because no one's helped me. And it was interesting. He's like, pain started to leave his body, and function and form started to return, and he started to find his own self back. And it's a very, my life is an absolute privilege because I get to share so many of these stories of helping people from no one can help me to probably surpassing his previous best. I live a very blessed and life to just be witness that, or just be a part of those kind of stories. So yeah, he's totally transformed the way he runs, the way he thinks, his relationship with running, and it's extraordinary. And
Yeah.
much more to come. The guys he ran in the 10K with have got 40-second PBs on him. And he just got there by grit. I mean, like he just wanted it so bad. But he ain't sacrificing the gift. So but I think a year or 2 years of running the way he is running will start to compound in that confidence and belief. So I do believe he's going to go for strength to strength. He's going to run the 5,000 tomorrow night in the heat, and hopefully the finals, and he gets a second bite of the apple maybe. But like I say, he's transformed so quickly and so fast. We actually don't know what he's capable of.
Yeah. I
And
wonder
he
how much.
ran after the 10K, and said, I said, how did you pull up, and you're okay? And he went for a run the next day. He says, I feel shockingly good. And that's one of the really, I was like, yeah, well, those are adjectives we like. But I think I'm a little worried. I always worried about those towns, not enough accommodation, rooms, people, like just like you can catch a bug. Like, I don't know, man. I'm not getting my hopes up. You know what I mean? I don't. We'll see. We'll see how it rolls. But I hope he has a good 2 races. But one of the interesting things is when you move really well. One is when you go from not running to running, because to be a frank and brutal and and get up some people's nostrils. Most of us don't run. We hop from foot to foot and move forward. I wouldn't really call it running. I think the definition of running is when people go, oh, this is sustainable. I trust and have confidence in this, and it reflects enough outward that you can see, wow, that's different, or they know what they're doing, right? And a second part of that, because that often happens first, is when feet go quiet. When someone runs and they move so well that you don't actually hear impact, then they've sort of started to master running. Those would be like the 2 steps. You can run, and then you master running. But what happens is, the stress in your body lands differently, and your recovery starts to change because it's just not as damaging. It just doesn't take as much out of you. And for people that have been running inefficiently or forcing it or having a big engine or trying hard, one of the big shocking things is like they have to reframe how hard they train or how hard they run because it doesn't feel like they're training. I worked with Jan Frodeno, and he says, like, Lawrence, I just don't feel like I've trained enough. I need to be beat up after training. And I said, you be careful because you're still getting the same dose of training. It's just not taking as much out of you. And he had a really hard time reconciling because he almost didn't feel like I've done enough work. Like, if I'm not shattered after a track session, did I push myself hard enough? Did I work hard enough? And I know it sounds bizarre, but one of the hardest things for athletes that are, the running is their gift. In other words, they're good at it, but they worked really, really hard, left no stone left unturned, like did all the things. And then, like in triathlon, especially, like you might be a really good swimmer and a biker, but you can't really run. You're moving down the road fast and furiously, but it's not really running. When they do learn how to run, I mean, we see significant breakthroughs in world-class athletes that have won at the highest level. We see 90-second to 2-minute increases in their 10K, and it happens quickly. It happens in 3 weeks. Taylor probably knocked about 90 seconds of a 10K in 3 weeks. When that happens is the ability to say, I am now talented and I'm worthy, and I have enough self-love, and I don't have drama and issues and past trauma. And we talk about like what happens to us growing up and all the things that can happen to us, and to be able to accept that I don't have to work as hard as others. This is easier. I don't have to do as much drills. I can reduce the amount of strength training I'm doing because it can be more on point. I don't have to do, I don't need 45 minutes of foam rolling and activations and all of these things in order to run well, and reframing and going from the hardest worker in the room to suddenly like, no, actually I can step into my power and I'm talented and I deserve it.
Yeah.
And I can promise you the hero's journey works like this. If you don't acknowledge and accept and receive that gift graciously, you're about to go on another's hero's journey. you know,
So
there's an
interesting.
athlete in mind. I'm not going to mention their name, but they went through that. They didn't accept the gift, and trust me, tried and worked hard and added things and went through purgatory because of it. And luckily, they're out of it now. But you learn that gift, or it will be forced upon you, sort of. You know, we never want to
Yeah.
wish a hero's journey on anyone, but it tends to be how it
Yeah.
works.
Man, it's very interesting. So, just out of curiosity, I can imagine that so many of the people listening to this are coming to the conversation from a technical perspective, and
Yeah.
the way that you discuss it. I mean, it makes so much sense, but I can just hear the lingering question, but I don't understand what's actually happening. It sounds as though it's a
Yeah.
combination of psychology and movement, and as you said earlier, which I love. Motion and emotion are sort of difficult to disconnect. So, like using Drew as an example, if you're happy to, like, what do those first couple of meetings look like? Obviously, we've talked about the fact that there was a lull in between the years of his junior career and where he's at now in terms of performance, and then he comes out in in 3 months and starts just shaking up the US Olympic trials over 10K, which was mind blowing. How do you navigate the way through the tension and the pain and the discomfort? Because from my perspective, I go, oh, but we're not giving that many cues. I know you've got a lot of, and I'm so keen to get into your ropes and your backwards walking and so many of the fun stuff that I've watched you speak about, and athletes that I coach have used and rave about. But just before we move on from Drew, like, are you able to talk more to that? Because it's just such a fascinating case.
I can tell you, no, it's not. I mean, this plays out so often. It's common. Drew got on the wrong. So we have, so again, we talk about extension based movement and hip extension, and we talk about flexion. We run on. This is a narrative, people. So like again, people, this is when you start bumping up against your beliefs, and anything that I say now that hurts you deep inside, you might want to write down and just think
Yeah.
about, because there's a reason it's hitting deep and hard. So, okay, so you have flexion and we have extension. Typically, if you can move through extension primarily as the root driver of your running, it tends to land better with your nervous system. So your autonomic nervous system is sympathetic and parasympathetic, and one is fight or flight, or a strong reaction, or I need extra, which is totally acceptable. We want adrenaline to flow through our veins on race day. That's how we manage to lift our game. But you can't live in a state of fight or flight. And for people with, I'm very respectful that there are people that aren't world class and they're just runners and stuff, and you might be stuck in fours or free, or fawn, which is bowing down, sort of, or freeze. And there's different sort of trauma responses, which is a whole very complicated world that I don't get too involved in, right? On the other side, we have parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. And that's the balance between autonomic nervous system. And we want the two to be synergistic and work together, and the one complements the other one, and we want a healthy autonomic nervous system. So we have an autonomic nervous system, and we want autonomic nervous system health. And a lot of what I do is to help you move in a way that is not antagonistic to your breathing. So movement and breath complement each other, because that ensures that we'll have a healthy autonomic nervous system. And it seems to be playing out more and more. So I have more and more confidence in the statement that if your running is hip extension based, it brings along the parasympathetic nervous system along for the ride. And I'm more and more convinced that, generally speaking, a big picture is that flexion based movement cues are antagonistic to that and tend to amplify the sympathetic nervous system. And what I don't think is healthy is having someone wired and tired, or in a constant state of sympathetic distress. And I don't think it's sustainable. And it can work for a certain period of time, but after a while the cracks start to show, and then we start to run into problems. And so for me, I try and help people run in a way that they'll be able to run for the rest of their life. And it's very much in terms of movement with your breath, and movement in a way that is extension based, or moving from the center out. And then that can be like in soccer, like if you watch like Ronaldo, they'll kick and then, they sort of move from their chest and then their foot comes through late. That notion of sort of cracking a whip, like a small movement in the hip has an amplified movement in the foot. if you look at golfers, like a novice golfer will whack with their hands, and the
Yeah.
best golfers in the world are sort of coming through, and then their hands come through so late. It's extraordinary. It almost looks like they're bending space and time. We want that. For me, is the indefinable soft thing that you're talking about your friend that ran so well. When people do that, you take notice and you say that's something special, and I like it. That's
Mm.
it tends to be we're moving from the center out, and the benefit of that is your parasympathetic nervous system likes it. So, like working with triathletes, a lot of them are here. We're running on their forefoot. We're doing a lot of drills, hamstring drills, flexion drills, hip flexors drills. You can get it on the wrong side of breathing patterns by doing too much core, inappropriate cueing. For me, very, very important. Your diaphragm initiates breath, and we don't want paradoxical or reciprocal breathing patterns. Like that's one of the first things I'll ever help an athlete with, is make sure that their breathing is healthy. And we can talk about that a little later.
Yeah.
And so what happens is getting a healthy autonomic nervous system, and people will go from, I know this is like a bit of a weird analogy, but go from a rescue dog, which will be tight and hard, and if you prod them, they will be like pokey and firm. They'll probably bite you if you poke them. Um, to a floofy puppy, their fascia starts to open up, their whole body starts to unwind, and that was kind of where Drew was at. He was a rescue dog. He was tight, guarded, defensive, and unfortunately, you load people like that with stress, they tend to shut down more, not open up, which was certainly a narrative along these lines was happening in his running. These are complex, intangible things. Sort of, they can be tangible. I'm trying to explain something that's very complicated,
For
simply
sure.
in a way that's not antagonistic. So treatment. If I treat people, I mean, this is something you should dive into if you want controversy. You get a guy like Adam Meekins on here, the sports physio, and he says you shouldn't touch people when you treat them. Well, I work with my hands, and I can work without my hands. So, but anyway, part of it is releasing neural and dural tension, or central nervous or spine tension, and you can do that with your hands. When I don't, if I work with people remotely, we'll tend to give them neural and dural unwinding. We'll try and unwind and sort of get the back of their neck posture to really stack well, and try and start taking neural tension out, and then put healthy breathing patterns into them, and then teach breathing patterns with movement. And it's just basically a whole process of unlocking and trust. And generally speaking, as neural tension leaves your body, muscles open up, the fascia behaves better, you get less trigger points, you don't need the foam roller kind of as much. You would be a narrative, you become more floofy puppy, and you're able to down regulate more and heal. And we want to sort of see people sleeping better. Like I say, with triathletes, a lot of them were insomniacs, or so wired. I mean, it's extraordinarily wild. They're just in a constant state of flight and anxiety. And that's very, very common. At WTCS level, I would estimate more than half of the pro women's field are insomniacs, or don't sleep, or have
Wow.
breathing disorders, or breathing pattern disorders, or have very, very not great quality of life in terms of autonomic nervous system health. And the autonomic nervous system just pops up anywhere. It's inflammation, it's your gut, it's your breathing, it's your sleep, it's your HRV, it's your recovery, it's your blood lactate curves. It manifests in everyone in a different sort of way. And so basically it was getting, Drew out of that. And then, it's just a story of working with your nervous system, working with your body. And that's where, again, the reframing. And a lot of the time when you start to do it, your mental and emotional state changes. Like, I used to be a lifesaver. You're Australian, right? It's life's whatever. I've
Yeah.
been to
You've
Australia to
nailed it.
World Life-Saving Championships. Been to
Oh,
Manly
yeah,
Beach,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
In America, it's lifeguards, right? So I used to pull a lot of people out of the water, and you're calm and collected and relaxed. They are not, and they don't have options, and they're making really bad decisions in the moment. I mean, they'll stand on their children's head to get air, and it is interesting if you look at that as a massive shift in between a calm, relaxed, competent space and trapped, fear of drowning, lack of air, options shutting down, I'm about to die, panicked and trapped. It's just two different worlds. And I know that's a very extreme example, but when people start relaxing, their autonomic nervous system unwinds, and they start to trust their body and their movement again, and they you have often a very, very powerful mental and emotional reframing. And when people's autonomic nervous system relaxes and heals, there's almost always a sense of like a spiritual shift that comes with it, which is doesn't have to be, but it usually transpires.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I often notice as well, and I'm not sure if this would be an exception to the rule, but I've heard it from a number of people, is that running is the ultimate de-stressor. And
Yeah.
so I've had experiences in my life where I've been going through, like 2018, I'd lost I'd lost a close friend and my nan who I was close with in a relatively short period of time.
Mm.
And I remember, like, looking back now, it's pretty easy to see that it was a period of grief. But at the time I was like, oh, I think I'm depressed. I think I'm going through depression or whatever. And I remember going out and doing hard efforts in running, and it was almost as though that was the release. And I was thinking
Yeah.
about this when you were speaking about the importance of movement in actually enjoying an activity or feeling as though you're going to another part of reality, because
Yeah.
it was almost as though at that time in my life, that relatively difficult effort of 30 minutes. The standout memory to me is a half marathon I ran here in 2017 or 2018, I can't remember.
Yeah.
And I got to about 15 Ks in, and I remember thinking, oh, okay, I think I'm going to be okay. Like, there's a part of my brain that knows how to still be okay and happy and relaxed.
Mm.
And I was only able to sort of tap into that when I was actually moving. And I tell you that story just to ask, is just like your running can be impacted by negative experience or negative
Mm.
emotion, I feel like I've noticed in my own life, sometimes the running has positively impacted my negative emotion, and I've sort of
Yeah.
finished the run in a more positive state than what I started the run.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that plays out all the time, and it's a chicken or egg, or it's like I tell people, it's a carousel. It doesn't matter where you hop on, just hop on.
Yeah.
The two do affect it. I think touching on that very importantly, exercise is the most powerful antioxidant and the most powerful anti-inflammatory in the world. Nothing beats it. Got all the health gurus telling you eat this, add that, turmeric, ginger. Generally speaking, if running's inflaming you, you're doing it really wrong, because you're doing something that is incredibly powerful in terms of its healing and its ability to heal. And if exercise, if you're inflamed and you feel inflamed and everything is inflammatory and you need lots of things, you're probably not doing your exercise as well as you could, because you're not tapping into something that's far more powerful than any oral, apart from a cortisone pack,
Yeah.
that you're taking. And yeah, and the gift is, if you run well, I think it amplifies what your experience is. I mean, you're a good runner. Unfortunately, it can almost happen the other way around, where you're running against your body and you're running with flexion. And I think it can shut your worldview down. I think the endorphins and the positive aspects of running, and for every downside, there's an upside. So it can, but you can have people that have very unhealthy relationships with running, and it's very evident, and anyone from the outside can see it. So I'd be hesitant to say like just running, but yes, exercise, sport, moving, thinking on your feet. We think clearer on our feet. We're more creative on our feet. One of the things I'm pretty passionate about is the more animated your spine is and your spinal engine, the more creative you become. And so people with a held spine have a rigid mind. Like, oh my God, we're going to get into trouble here. Like Stuart McGill, and so much of people in this country, McGill basically wrote the textbooks for PT and for strength and conditioning and for everything we know.
Yeah.
And there's the McGill Big Three, but he was like, you need a stiff spine, but that makes you guarded, defensive, and reactionary. You need a stiff spine to go to war. You don't need a stiff spine if you want neuroplasticity or creativity, or you want to solve complex movements in the moment. You have to be dynamic and flexible and adaptable. And rigid spine, rigid mind, flexible spine, flexible mind. Those two for me are like absolutely synonymous. You're really going to see someone with a ramrod stiff spine be really creative and funny and take things lightly. That's just not. There's no world where that sort of happens, right? So it is extraordinary, this world of yeah, for sure, move, and how healing it can be, and how all the great thinkers of the world thought in their feet, like Darwin. I mean, everyone. Beethoven walked 2 hours before he composed. I mean, this is known. We study and you get taught anatomy and muscles and all of these things, but like, unfortunately we don't get to see how all of this fits in together as a big picture, and how amazingly beautiful and complicated humans are.
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, it's been interesting the last couple of years, and just how much this is a little bit of a pivot, but it's interesting to see how you can take an isolated conversation or an isolated idea, and if the institution says that that's the way it goes, people buy on pretty quickly,
Yeah,
whether it's a doctor or a teacher or a coach or whatever. And I mean, here in Australia over the last couple of years, I thought was an interesting example. Just when every professional in the world said that no, the only way through COVID is this, and then now we have a look back a couple of years ago and we go, okay, well, it appears as though there might have been some other options that other countries
yeah,
tried that were also effective. But and
yeah,
so the humility comes a little after the fact. And so, I mean, I really like the idea that you can, the idea of just going to an expert or one expert for anything is a little less, I have a little less confidence in than what I did just a few years ago, because, yeah, so often it seems that, a lot of the time, someone who's well trained, or especially from an institutional sense, is often just parroting what the people before them have said. So I
yeah.
always like when you get an independent thinker come through and, I mean, still speak to them, but not necessarily take everything they say as gospel.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and again, like everything is actually true, and the opposite of everything is also true. It's very difficult because we like to think in binary terms, like right and wrong and this way or that way. And
Yeah,
again, to speaking to someone that, let's say, well, oh, totally stiff spine, and maybe I've rubbed you up the wrong way. Just remember, anytime what I say rankers or prickles you or gets under your skin, there's an opportunity for growth, and there's an opportunity for more, and there's an opportunity to become better at what you do, or have a deeper sense of understanding. And because we have to, if we can't see the duality in things, we're in deep trouble. And I once had a decent, very respectful, but a pretty, we went at it, conversation with a physio, and I said to him at the end, okay, let's leave it here, and we can pick this up later. And I said, you misunderstand. I understand what you know. I was trained and thought like you thought. I maybe don't know the depth and the nuance and the amountness that you know, but I understand your side of the story. And I've worked like that for 10 years, but I choose not to. Again, you don't understand a thing that has come out of my mouth. Intellectually, you're rationalizing, you forming arguments against it and why it wouldn't work. But you don't understand the duality of it. And you only understand something if you can live in both worlds, if you understand the duality. and
yeah,
and and that's kind of like, if you want to start, I think in a professional that takes their profession seriously, you go through sort of some sort of journey where you first have to study, and you have to respect the institution and the books and the textbooks, and you need to know the fundamentals really, really well.
yes,
Like someone was saying, I mean, I said, look, I could probably tell you exactly what every single joint and muscle in your body should do and how it should move. Once you know that, you can let go of it. You know what I mean? Like then but you first have to know, and you have to practice, and that's just it. And wherever you're at is good enough. But if
for
you want
sure.
to master your profession, then you're going to have to start understanding dualities. And unfortunately, understanding dualities is the hardest, most difficult thing. It's harder than a divorce. And
Yeah,
and we are all very capable, and I'm mindful of this myself. We can build ourselves an ivory tower, and it can be on a very slippery base, and we start defending the tower, and it's impossible, almost impossible, to tear your own tower down. But we have
yeah,
to, as curators of knowledge, as thought leaders, as influencers, as people that people come to for advice. You have to hold your knowledge lightly in your hand, and you have to be able to also say, what I am saying to this person might not be true, or it might not be true for them, and I don't know. It's a very, very difficult space too, because our brains are not wired that way.
for
Uh,
sure. I was just taking a mental note. The next time I argue with my wife, I've got to have this approach. I've got to think about it. But you're right, when the emotions
Tyson, no,
creep
no, no, no,
in.
no. I'm going to give you guru advice now. It's really easy. Your wife is always right. Okay. So if you're right, if you're both right, she's righter. If you're wrong and
I'm
she's
so
right, she's right. If she's wrong and you're right, she's right. And if you both make a bad decision, then the bad decision's yours.
Yeah, of course. Actually, it's funny you say that because that's what she often tells me, but I've refused to buy into it. I'd been writing it down because I noticed it stiffened my spine when she said it.
Don't go quietly into the night, good man.
I'm going to make sure I tell her not to listen to this podcast.
Edit this
Um,
bit out.
yeah, I will for sure. I will for sure. Hey, Lawrence, before I let you go, I was curious because I think one of the things that when people hear your name or see you, they often talk about are your ropes. And if you
Yes.
haven't seen Lawrence online or if you haven't seen his ropes, make sure you go and check out the videos because they're very interesting. They're very fun. Can you just walk me through the ropes a little more, or more specifically, are you able to walk through the audience what it is that you're doing?
Okay, so we have a protocol, and I hate the word protocol, but we have something that works that gives structure to people so they can understand. So it's not all just like, oh my God, some spiritual mumbo jumbo. We want action, and it really, really works. And it's we're sort of playing around, and this is tongue in cheek, so please don't get upset, people. But we call it like kind of the holy trinity at the moment because it really, really is an effective archetype to create in order to sort of get going. And we use the flow rope and backward walking and then tire walking. And I'll quickly sort of take you through them. The flow rope, if you go online and Google flow rope, David Weck is who created the flow rope. And he's a sort of a mad genius scientist kind of guy. I'm using the flow rope very differently. We're using it to help for a couple of reasons. One is it helps people figure out anterior chain and posterior chain in their body. And from a neurological point of view, so from your frontal lobe and your cerebellum, you can get stuck in a pattern of movement that's very, very difficult to shade. So we want to open the door to posterior chain movement. So a lot of people, because of all the flexion, because of trauma, because of whatever reasons, are almost incapable of moving in posterior chain dominant movements. And I don't view doing a deadlift as a posterior chain exercise. I think swinging the flow rope backwards in a figure of eight is a posterior chain exercise.
Yeah.
Or underhand. So it comes underneath from behind and then up and over your shoulder. And most people's dominant pattern is to chop down, like we're chopping wood. You want to swing the rope down. And the other difference from, let's say, work would be that we swing it slowly because it decompresses your spine and it kind of repatterns your fascia, which
Yeah.
athletes want it to be tight and crisp and strong, and they like kind of swing it fast. So that would be the difference there. The other thing about the flow rope is you're always moving from the center out. So after a while, it makes your running very, very symmetrical. So your imbalances start to smooth out, and you start to get this sense of moving from the center out. And it sort of brings a soft magic touch to your running that just takes a bit of time and a process. And
Yeah.
we can also teach people the shape and timing of running. So more head of a foot, and the timing of rope, head, and foot at the same time. So you're running sort of from base of support to base of support. So it opens quite a lot of doors. I mean, flow, we talked about Floris, I'm kind of Floris Gearman from Path Project, and he's got an amazing podcast. You know, he basically ran backwards and liberated some sort of trauma, and he had this profound emotional response, which he bravely put on YouTube, and he was just sobbing afterwards because he had kind of like yours, like this profound healing or spiritual sort of experience when he expressed these movements in his running is a way of saying it. So that's the flow rope. The second part is backward walking, and we use backward walking to help change the timing of running more from land and immediately get off the ground to sort of a land, travel forward, load and store elastic energy in your muscles and in your super shoes, okay, and then releasing it. So we can teach it gives your brain permission to have your heel on the ground longer. And it also lengthens out your Achilles and your hamstrings, which prepares you for sort of tire walking. And also, it's really, really good at giving you forefoot to rear foot mobility. So it's fantastic for people. You come in and I treat you. I can assess your forefoot and your first met head and whether you got a forefoot varus or not. You know, for people that we work with remotely, we find backward walking on an incline drops your first met head and gives you forefoot to rear foot mobility and basically corrects a forefoot varus. Most of the time, not all of the time. So just please, let's not think of absolutes here. Never take anything I say absolutely. And I might change my mind next week and none of this will be true. Right.
Yeah.
And
I thought you were going
then,
to say I might change my mind next week and it'll all be true.
okay. And then we use tire walking and you walk on a treadmill with resistance bands as well. But basically what we're doing is we in and this is also something that, like, for me, I never teach anything to people quickly. So we're going to work on any movement cue, we'll do for running, we'll do it walking or stationary or in a safe, secure environment. And then we want to see it show up in the running. I'm not about to tell someone running down the road, I want you to think about this when you're running. Running's too quick. It's too many things going on. You've got too much stuff to process. It's very difficult to absorb that kind of knowledge. So mostly, not exclusively, we want to solve things slowly. And we'll see this in music. You learn your chord shape slowly. You learn your scales slowly. You learn penmanship slowly. Running is the only sport in the world where, like, no, mate, if you take more steps a minute, it's going to get better. Okay. More bad steps a minute, right? So tire walking is basically learning the shape of glute activation, and the resistance of the tire really helps bring your glute max online and helps you figure out and pattern in your brain hip extension based gait, and you learn it slowly. And if most people that do that magically transform them running, and it happens quickly, it happens in about 3 weeks, and you don't it's extraordinary the positive change that happens and shows up in running, and so much goodness that it would be sacrilege to try and tell them what they should and shouldn't be doing during that time. It is literally life changing. And kind of, I know it sounds crazy, but my job when I work with athletes, I'll explain, this is probably what we're going to do. My job is to help you figure out what's blocking the awesome from unleashing. Okay. Because, like, my job is to problem solve. If we know, I have so much confidence in doing that in terms of what it brings to the table for your running. Basically, I see my job as more, if you're not responding, we need to know why. And are you walking in these ways appropriately? And then and a lot of times is to sort of hold a space for the person so that they can step into it. Like, because literally for it's not, a lot of people want a spiritual response, like they are desperately, there's a spirituality component to humans that is just sort of undeniable, right? The problem is that at a certain level of mastery of movement, this does have a sort of a powerful mental and emotional change. A lot of people are running to lose weight or for secondary reasons. It's not your primary purpose. You're not a Drew hunter. It's not you're not put on this earth to run. I mean, we were born to run, but it's not your true purpose. And so it's kind of a little difficult. So you might not have such a powerful sort of mental and emotional experience, but interestingly enough, like, trying to help create the environment so that this transformation, people can reconcile it and have it healthy and nurturing. And it can be very not traumatic. It's change. And I mean, let's say, athletes will change their coaches because, like, you have a coach that's dogmatic. This is what you need to do, blah, blah, blah. And suddenly it just doesn't make sense to the athlete. They're like, this doesn't make sense to me. Your cues don't even, it doesn't land. Like, you can't help me anymore. The nice thing about Drew is Drew's mom was one of the person that encouraged him to come see me, and she's all about all of this. So the coach, the mom, now in that squad, it's easy because Drew's had a magical transformation. The others are, well, I'll have some of that. That's easy. But when you're, I mean, if I walked into, like, Alberto Salazar's camp for some stage, and then suddenly Galen Raps are like, hey man, no, you just got to open up and feel it. It's like, you might find, I'm not gelling here. So there can be quite a lot of, like, so a lot of it is actually, believe it or not, is helping them understand and reframe and to be comfortable and to help them with, like, that's a really positive response to running, and we welcome that in.
No,
So
well
I know
said,
it sounds
man.
weird, but that's kind
No,
of
it's I mean,
the
I've
space
listened to you
that.
enough, and I feel like I'm coming from a position where I seem to lean towards the weird, and so maybe
Yeah.
that's the reason I enjoy these conversations so much.
Awesome.
But man, I feel like so many people are the same. You've definitely hit a nerve in a positive way. I say that you've
Okay.
hit a positive nerve with a lot of people around the world and seen some crazy results, man. So I'm cheering for you, brother, and I'm
Thank
so
you.
grateful, man. Thanks for making the time to come on here.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you. And yeah, it is nice. Like someone said, like you suddenly everywhere I look, and I'm like, yeah, like I've been in America 10 years. It's an overnight
Yeah.
success,
Yeah.
But yeah, at the moment, I'm very blessed. There's a lot of good and going right. And at one stage, I was almost starved for having examples of people that run really well. And yeah, at the moment, we're sitting on a groundswell of movement certainly in triathlon, the people that are moving well and moving in such I think a healthy reframing of what can be sometimes harmful or frustrating or damaging. So feel very grateful, blessed, and privileged, and thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
And if you ever need anything, just shout, and let's make the world a better place, one run at a time.
Hey, I love it. I love it, man. For anyone who's interested, I'll obviously have your website linked, but is there anything else that you'd like to tell people about, courses, training, whatever else they might be interested in?
These are evergreen, so that hopefully by the second half of 2024, after the Olympics, I'll have a running workshop and an online course out there that'll take you through. At the moment, it's a little roughshod, so if you'd like, you can join my community, and we do breathing and movement classes and mobility classes, and there's a lot of resources. It's not, some people are finding it's not enough for them, which I apologize for, but we're working on it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you can join on my community and that, or you just follow along on social media. I try and put quite a lot of resources and knowledge out there, and you can hurry slowly. You can just join along for the journey, and again, environment, community, and culture is so important. So I'm trying to create a community and culture, and we help reframe the way people view running, because I think that's the hardest part and the most important part.
Yeah. Awesome, man. All right. We'll leave it there. I'll see you soon.
Okay. Take you. Take care.
See you later, everybody.